In this video we're going to be covering how to set up and perform reverse band stiff-legged deadlift. There's a bit of confusion on the internet and in general around stiff-legged deadlift and Romanian deadlift. I'm not going to get into specifics on that, but for the sake of this video, stiff-legged deadlift is going to be defined as a normal deadlift. It can be performed either sumo or conventional, but trying to use the minimum amount of knee bend possible. A small amount of knee bend is required so you can maintain good posture during the movement, or at least a strong, efficient posture. If you straighten your leg out completely, you'll have an excessive amount of lumbar flexion required to get to the bar. That's not going to allow us to use our hamstrings and hips in a way that's going to strengthen and transfer over to deadlift. So a small amount of knee bend is required. So that's why stiff versus straight is a pretty important, a pretty important bit of detail when it comes to defining what this exercise is. But it's just a normal deadlift. Otherwise, the lack of knee bend limits the amount of quadricep that can be used, which then provides an overload for lower back, hamstrings and glutes, hips basically, hips and spine, in a way that's going to help overload and develop them in a way that's going to directly impact your deadlift. So it's going to strengthen your posterior chain in a way that's going to push your deadlift specifically. It's also just a good general builder or strength builder for hamstrings, primarily at the hips, so proximal hamstring, glutes and low back. Okay, so we're going to run through a few aspects of this. First of all, in a normal reverse band setup, you'll use the top of the rack. However, for deadlift, that's going to be way too high and you're going to get far too much band tension. So we're going to use the safeties of the rack to set it up. We've got pin and pipe safeties on this rack. You can use a drop-in rack, basically anything solid, so like a webbing or a strap is not going to provide a really good consistent band tension or a good anchor. So a pin and pipe or a drop-in or anything kind of solid as steel. So you're going to have to eyeball this a bit. So you can use the length of the band as a guide. So that's the length of the band. So if I double that over, if I go around where this is set up at the minute, that's probably going to be a reasonable position to start. So I'm going to set up the pin and pipe and I'll cut to that. Okay, so the first thing you need to do, get the barbell down on the floor. We then need to move the pins up to the height we want. So we're going to use it without the pipes. The pipes are here to protect the pins. We don't need that. Okay, so we've set the pin to the right height. We'll take our band and we'll double it over so it sits like this. Which of course can be done at any point, but that's going to set up the reverse band we want. Okay, so we're set up now with the pins of the height we want. So there's two ways of going around to set this up. You can put what's called a choke on the band, where you feed it through itself like this. So this might be a good idea if you're going to set the pins higher and maybe want a longer contrast or a longer band tension, or have band tension applied for a longer bar path, or sorry, a longer bar path. I'm going for the double. This is going to give you more tension from the floor, and also should provide will give you a bigger contrast. So I'm going to run out of band tension at one point during the lift. So what we do is we just put the barbell through, make sure it sits on the inside, same on the other side. Okay, so that's the basic setup. And now we just line it up so it's more or less even, and then we add some weight. Okay, now we have it set up. We're going to add weights. You want to make sure you use collars on this because there's going to be a bit of unbalance when you set it up. So first plate goes on, feed it through. Quite a lot of band tension on this. Set up, clip on, same the other side. That would be the basic starting point. Before I demonstrate the exercise itself, I can already tell there's a hell of a lot of band tension on this. So I'm just going to add another 20 kilos aside, just so there's a bit more of a realistic setup for the first set. Starting with 60 on this is probably a bit too light. Okay, so that's the setup. With this setup, I would probably look to go for a choke and a higher point. So I think this is going to give me a hell of a lot of tension from the floor, and I'm not going to get a lot of help for very long, so it's going to be a massive contrast. So this might be a setup you want to use if overload and lockout's a big concern you're trying to target. With bands and chains, there's a hell of a lot of art to it. You basically got to fuck around and find out what the right setup is. So for this setup, I would go with a higher pin and go for a choke rather than a double band, but it is what it is now, so it'll do for sense, it'll do for demonstration purposes, but for training purposes I probably wouldn't go with this unless I was really trying to contrast the lockout and trying to work on transition from knee drive to hip drive and locking out. For stiff-legged deadlift, set up as normal stance width, normal everything. You're trying to hinge to the barbell, so imagine you're doing an RDL, or you're just doing a hinge. So small knee bend, hips back, hinge to the barbell, hands on, brace, and then lift. And then lower the same way, lower like a hinge, all the way down, let it rest for a dead stop, and then from there, lift. And then back down. Alright, so what I'll do now is I'll show you a close-up from the side of the barbell so you can kind of see more what's going on in terms of the setup. Right, and there you have it, a video tutorial on how to set up reverse band for deadlift and also stiff-legged deadlift with a reverse band setup. This is a pretty useful drill. Like I said at the start of the video, if you really want to focus on hip, lower back and hamstring strength that is going to be specific to your own deadlift, this is an excellent exercise for that, just stiff-legged deadlift. If you want a good drill for working on overload or working on kind of the lockout specific portion of the deadlift, reverse band's really good for that. If you're looking for like an ME exercise, reverse band's a great option to cycle in. It's just it's a fairly lesser utilized variation. Bands and chains are a bit easier to set up, whereas having a power rack you could deadlift in is relatively uncommon in most gyms. and then setting up the reverse bands is a bit of a pain in the ass, but it is a pretty good tool you can utilize if you have access. And there wasn't any tutorials on YouTube specifically for this setup, so that's why I made it, and because I put it in someone's program, and here we are. Thanks very much, thanks for watching. If this is useful, fantastic. If it wasn't, you've watched it anyways, who's a fucking fool? Like and subscribe, comment, whatever. See you in the next one.